Good morning and welcome to you all. A special welcome to you if you are visiting with us. And Joshua, are we online? Good morning and welcome to those who are joining us online as well. We're continuing our series, as you can perhaps tell from the slide behind me, that we're calling Strengthening the Heart of the Fellowship. And there's a couple of ideas that are implicit in that I want to make explicit before we get into kind of like this morning's topic proper. And firstly, this strengthening is about deeper discipleship. The School of Leadership that we're starting next month, it is October next month, and which some of you have signed up for, and you can still sign up for, but it's coming close for us to be able to get the books for you, is about helping us go deeper in discipleship. These morning Sunday sessions that we've been doing, we've been looking at discipleship issues that we might go deeper in discipleship. But what do we mean by deep discipleship? Are we kind of like putting on scuba gear and going diving? And here's the heart of it. We talk a good game, but has Jesus really changed us? If we were to go out into Vicky Road or up into Shawlands and we were to do a vox pop, perhaps the most common thing that we would hear of people's reactions to Christians in churches, aye, they're hypocrites. Aye, we need to be deeply changed by Christ, to learn to live in a more Christ-like way, to encounter God. That's what we have been doing this morning as we've been worshipping God, we've been encountering Him. That our lives might come into alignment with His kingdom. And that involves doing an inner work. But that inner work happens in community. To become more like Christ, we need to be committed to, we need to be learning to follow Christ as part of a community. And it's a bit like the old age conundrum of what came first, the chicken or the egg. And the relationship between God working on me as an individual in my quiet time alone with Him and God working on us as His community is not sequential. It's not one happens after the other, but it's symbiotic. We need both. As I keep saying, I find it really easy to be holy on my own, but as soon as I meet other people, that becomes a bit more of a challenge. We're looking to develop what Anabaptist theologian David Osberger calls tripolar spirituality. And he calls this a spirituality of radical agape, that beautiful Greek word which talks of unconditional love, of God-type love. And perhaps obviously the first pole in this tripolar thing is the love of God. We are radically loved by God. Not a wee bit, radically loved by God. Do we live in the light of that? Do we live as people who are radically loved by God? And because we are radically loved by God, we love God radically back. God's radical love towards us transforms how we understand ourselves. And from that, we learn what appropriate self-love looks like. There's an appropriate love of ourselves. And one of the things appropriate self-love looks like is crucifying, dying to ways of living that are ungodly. Laying aside some of the obvious ones: lying, stealing, hating, gossip, talking down our colleagues, taking credit for work that we didn't do. And that's not easy. And it's an area in which many of us get stuck. We make so much progress, but then we can get stuck We don't know how to take the next step. Maybe when we first became Christians, knew rapid growth. I was looking at one of the babies and, man, just growing so rapidly. I can remember reading a stat that if a baby, and the medics in here can correct me on this, but something like if a baby continues to grow as fast as it grows in its first 9 months, if it continued that for its first 10 years, it would be the size of an elephant. And when we first come to Christ, it can seem like our growth is like that, and then it slows down and we get stuck, or we regress, and we pick up bad habits again. And crucially, tripolar spirituality means that we don't just love God, we don't just love ourselves, but we love each other as brothers and sisters. That's part of God's love transforming us, that you're not just my friend, or you're not just somebody I sit beside on a Sunday morning, but you're a brother and sister. That means a kind of relationship, a commitment to each other. We love our neighbours. And yes, because this is a radical agape, we love those who dislike us and whom may even be our enemies. Jesus said, John 13:35, by this, everyone will know that you are my disciples. That you are hypocrites. No, that you have love one for the other. That's a challenge. So in these Sunday mornings, we're investing time and energy in looking at this in the School of Leadership. Again, investing time and energy. Not because we want to look inward, but because at the heart of this, unless we change what is our witness, unless we change, our mission is fruitless. We're not looking to become better versions of ourselves, but we are looking to be transformed by God, that we have something to share of the good news of Jesus, to love each other well, to love our neighbours well, to love our colleagues well, our families well, and so the list go on. For the sake of Jesus' mission in the world. If it's not about that, let's go home and do something else. And the discipleship issue that I'd like us to think about this morning is worship. And specifically, what it might mean, what we might gain by thinking about whole life worship. So we're going to start with a Bible reading which is a less than obvious place for this, of what it means to be a whole life worshipper. The words will be in the screen, but if you want to follow along, we're going to turn to Psalm 82, and Susan's going to come and read the psalm for us. We're going to do the whole psalm, and I'll try and click at the right points.
Thank you, Brodie. So Psalm 82. God has taken his place in the divine council. In the midst of the gods, he holds judgment. How long will you judge unjustly and show partiality to the wicked? Selah. Give justice to the weak and the orphan. Maintain the right of the lowly and the destitute. Rescue the weak and the needy. Deliver them from the hand of the wicked. They have neither knowledge nor understanding. They walk around in darkness. All the foundations of the earth are shaken. I say, you are gods, children of the Most High, all of you. Nevertheless, you shall die like mortals and rise like any prince. Rise up, O God, judge the earth, for all the nations belong to you. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Susan, for reading God's word to us. If you read the blog this week, you'll know that there are, at least in my mind, 3 different ways that we might go with thinking about whole life worship, each legitimate in their own right. There's whole life worship as giving to God all that we are. There's whole life worship as the perseverance of the saints, of being in it for the long haul, the good and the bad. And there's whole life worship as a description of a theology of work, or to phrase it perhaps in a more inclusive way, whole life worship is what we do the other 6 days of the week. But before we go there, let's take a step back. I like Eugene Peterson. He's one of these people that you're like, I'd love to have met Eugene Peterson. And I like his comments on worship in his wee kind of like commentary in the book of Revelation, Reverse Thunder. And he makes comments rather than a definition. Definitions tend to close things down rather than open things up. And Peterson writes, Christians worship with a conviction that they are in the presence of God. Worship is an act of attention to the living God. As I was typing that, I mistyped, and I typed in the presence of attention to a loving God. And of course, that's equally true, isn't it? We're attentive not only to the reality that God is living, but that the fundamental character of God that he is loving, he is for us. And Peterson continues, the end result of this act of worship is that our lives are turned around. Worship in prayer, song, preaching, baptism, gathering around the Lord's table, the Eucharist, communion, the different names that we would give to that act. These are not neutral activities. They turn us, they shift us, turn us away from ungodliness towards God. And so as we're attentive to who God is, that challenges who I am and means that I cry out, Spirit of God, I need to be more loving. I need to be more forgiving. It turns us. And of course, I experience that myself. But there's something dynamic, there is something wonderful, there is something challenging, there is something hard about doing that here together. Worship is not just an individual activity, it is an activity of the church. And so our commitment to gather together as church to worship, to that challenge of breaking bread together in the context of 1 Corinthians 11, where Paul is saying, here's an example of it not being done well. That's integral to our discipleship. Without being together, we get bent out of shape. Now, that's not to claim that church is perfect. Clearly, it is not. It's not to say that sometimes church bends us out of shape, because we all know that that happens as well. It's to say that this is important. That each one of us contributes. Even if your contribution is just the smile on the door, you do not know the significance of that, of your singing in tune and out of tune. You do not know the significance that that has on the person next to you, in front of you, or behind you. It's important. Your being here matters. Your being here might be the difference between a person feeling encouraged or staying down. But we don't live in a continual Sunday morning, do we? We will leave here sometime today. Some of us will. Anyway, there's life outside of Sunday worship. In church, let's not reduce it to Sunday worship as well. Sunday worship is important, but there are things that happen every day in our buildings and in your homes, which are church. Coffee together, life group, playtime, play break, parkrun cafe. Loads of things that are part of what life in church is. And our time on a Sunday, hopefully, flows into Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. The turning around we experience isn't just for a moment, but we take that into who we are in the rest of the week, in our other 6 days? And if at its heart, worship is an attentiveness to the presence of God, then because we know that God is at work in our world, and that God is at work in us, and that Jesus is with us, then that attentiveness needs to not just be on a Sunday morning, but God is present with us when we're catching up with somebody on a Monday, when we're doing the hoovering, when we're at work. Are we attentive to God's presence then? Not just in our quiet time, or whatever we call that. I like what Tish, I keep wanting to say Trish, I like what Tish Harrison Ward says. God made us to spend our days in rest, work, and play, taking care of our bodies, our families, our neighborhoods, our homes. What if all these boring parts matter to God? What if days passed in ways that feel small and insignificant to us are weighty with meaning and part of the abundant life that God has for us? How abundant is life? Feeling sometimes it feels squished and not abundant. And we've used the language of front lines to describe these other 6 days. Some of you in life groups have looked at fruitfulness in the front line and faithfulness in the front line and all that stuff that comes from the London Institute of Contemporary Christianity. Great. And I like that idea because front lines means that when we think of work, when we think of these other 6 days, we're not just reducing it to paid employment. Not all of us here are in paid employment. Some of you have done your shift and you're retired and you are enjoying that. Some of you are looking forward to it. Others of you are studying. Not everybody. So front lines, I like that idea of front lines, of what we do those other 6 days, and particularly what we do in those other 6 days when we are with people who do not yet know Jesus. In those spaces, are we attentive to the presence of God? To what God perhaps is already doing in that person's life or in that situation. And this attentiveness to God in all spaces and places, perhaps there is no greater example of what this looks like in somebody who did it very well than Brother Lawrence, an obscure 16th century Carmelite monk from Paris. Keen to devote his life to God, he joined a monastery. Now, I don't know, but I suspect his ambitions were, I'm going to spend my days in prayer, I'm going to lead services, I'm going to spend my days in studying scripture and copying it. He was sent to the kitchen. He was sent to the kitchen. That was his job. If I was him, I would be royally annoyed. Yet Lawrence resolved, no matter what task he was given, to continually be attentive to God from one moment to the next. He spoke of prayer as simply growing in an awareness of the presence of God. And of course, we're told to pray continually. Lawrence comments, the time of busyness does not differ from the time of prayer. And the noise and clatter of the kitchen, while several persons are at the same time calling for different things, I possess God as in great tranquility, as if I were upon my knees. I make it my business not only to persevere in his holy presence, which I may call an actual presence of God, or to speak better, a habitual silent and secret conversation of the soul with God. I suspect listening to what Lawrence says there is a bit like watching an elite athlete. You know, you watch the London Marathon and things like that, and you see people running 26 miles faster than I can run 100 yards for 26 miles. But years and hours of dedication and practice has gone into that. And Lawrence's ability in the noisy clattering of a kitchen where folk are shouting and dropping and spilling and goodness knows what has come from the time that he has spent on his knees, familiarizing himself with God's presence. So that when he's in the noise and the mix of that kitchen, he senses God there. He still has to apply himself to that. He still has to, I would imagine, as he walked into that kitchen, pray. But he's done the hard work as well. Our time together here is part of our training. That we, like Brother Lawrence, in all circumstances, might know, might discern God's presence, that we might become attuned to it. That in our busyness, we have that secret conversation of the soul with God. Brother Lawrence most probably was part of a tradition that practiced sometimes what's called the daily office or the hours. Different traditions do this slightly differently. And the idea is really quite simple. That either 3 or 5 times a day you pray. You stop what you're doing. Often it's set prayers or communal Bible reading. So what I'm reading, others are reading. Those of you who like and use Lectios 365, you are knowingly or unknowingly participating in a form of this tradition. 3 times a day, morning, lunchtime, or early afternoon, nighttime, often just before bed. Sounds easy, really hard to do. And it's one of the key things, developing this kind of like habit of a daily office is one of the key things that we will be looking to do as the School of Leadership, just putting that warning out there for those of you who have signed up. And it's something that I've been trying to do, and others who've been kind of like going through this material that they might lead have been doing. And I'm aware that I'm very much a work in progress. My consistency is poor. But I have found this rhythm of coming before God, and before I speak to him, being silent and listening to him. Before I come with my shopping list and to-do list and needs list, of just being silent and listening to him. One of the most impactful things I've done in my Christian life. Going back to the Tish Harrison Warren quote for a moment. God made us to spend our days in rest, work, and play. Taking care of our bodies, our families, our neighborhoods, our homes. What if all these boring parts matter to God? The answer is yes, they do. What if days are passed in ways that feel small and insignificant to us are weighty with meaning? Yes, they often are, and part of the abundant life that God has for us. There's more to worship than what we have done this morning, great as that was. Great as that is. Baking a cake, teaching our children or teaching children, coding a computer. Do they matter to God? Can these activities also be worship? Now, some of you have already worked out by the number of various times I've quoted him that I quite like Miroslav Volf. Not because I agree with everything that Volf says, but because he said a lot about a lot of different things. So when I'm thinking about something, I often think, I wonder what Miroslav thinks on this. And Volf wrote a fascinating book called Work in the Spirit, Towards a Theology of Work. And kind of building on where Stephen was with us last week when Stephen was talking about God has given us gifts. Volf says that God gives us as his children callings, talents, and enablings, charisms, gifts. That's the Greek word for gift. So we can, in anticipation of the wholeness of the beauty, of the goodness of new creation, of God making all things new in Christ Jesus. Participate that now in our work. He goes on to say, all Christians have several gifts of the Spirit. Since most of these gifts can be exercised only through work, work must be considered a central aspect of Christian living. What are the gifts that God has given you and I that aren't for in here, but are for out there? Or can be for both? The ability to speak to anybody, that chattiness, that's a gift. It's a God-given gift. It's a God-given gift that allows you to connect, allows you to make people here feel welcome, but more importantly, it's a gift that allows you, do you know what? You're probably also an evangelist. And to connect with people, to walk alongside people, to share the good news with them. Because Wolf isn't just thinking about paid work here. He's thinking about our baking a cake, caring for a friend, as well as designing websites or building cars. Some people can take this idea and then go with it and say, well, does that mean that everything or anything is worship? And if everything and anything is worship, then is Sunday really that important? Is gathering together as God's people critical? Can I not just do it on my own? Enjoy a sunset on a beach, me and God in beautiful fellowship, and avoid getting up early to come to church. And the idea that everything can be worship is rightly challenged, I think, by that great contemporary philosopher syndrome from the wonderful Pixar movie, The Incredibles. The profundity of what syndrome says is, I assure you, profound. Now, for those of you that have not seen The Incredibles, why not? It's just the best movie ever. But the story is there's this bunch of people who are Incredibles. They have these superpowers. They're able to do things. And Syndrome is a wee boy, experiences rejection. He comes alongside Mr. Incredible. He wants to be like Mr. Incredible, but he doesn't have the talents that Mr. Incredible has. And Mr. Incredible says, you're being annoying, go away. So he then becomes the evil supervillain. And his plan is that he is going to give everybody superpowers. I mean, he should have gone to the School of Leadership because he'd have helped to deal with that rejection. And he says this, everybody can be super, and when everybody is super, no one will be. Ha, 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 ha. I'm not sure if he did an evil laugh, but I thought I would practice my evil laugh this morning. If everything is worship, is anything worship? And here I think our theologies need a gentle correction. Because not everything we do is worship, though we can do many things worshipfully. Even if you didn't grow up Anglican, knowingly or unknowingly, I suspect that most of you can quote almost verbatim the first clause of the Westminster Shorter Catechism of 1647, not long before Charles I lost his head and Cromwell did some interesting things. The first clause asks this: what is the chief end of man? Familiar yet? I'm seeing blank looks. The answer, at least to the Shorter Catechism, is man's chief end is to glorify God and enjoy him forever. And very often glorify acts as a synonym for worship. Man's chief end is to worship God and glorify him and enjoy him forever. And that brings us to Psalm 82, which Susan read for us, but also 2 Peter 1:4 and the issue of whole life worship. Because I would suggest to you that the chief end of man and woman is, at least according to our Orthodox friends, Eastern Orthodox friends, and I think I'm in agreement with them, is what they call theosis. Christophorus Stavropoulos, he was a Greek theologian in the 1930s, wrote what's become the classic essay on the meaning of theosis. Theo, of course, that word, Greek word for God. And he says, in the Holy Scriptures, where God himself speaks, we read of a unique call directed to us. God speaks to us as human beings clearly and directly. I said, you are gods. The lowercase g is important, just putting that out there. You are gods, Son of the Most High. All of you. Jesus himself quotes this in John 10:34. Christophorus continues, do you hear that voice? Do we understand the meaning of this calling? Do we accept that we should, in fact, be on a journey, a road which leads to theosis? The Apostle Peter describes this with total clarity. The purpose of life is that we should become partakers of the divine nature. Now, if this sounds a little strange or avant-garde for your theological tastes, let me suggest that most of us have grown up with an idea of theosis, which is this: become more like Jesus. Be conformed to Christ. Become more Christ-like. And at the heart of this idea of being partakers of the divine nature is, if we ask what that divine nature is, then that divine nature is the divine nature in which the incarnation happened, in which Jesus left the glory of heaven to come down in the dust and dirt of earth. Why? Because God so loved the world that he wished that none would perish, that it would all come to know him. And so as we participate, as we partake in the divine life, so the outflow is that we participate in the mission of God. Worship is not an end in itself. Worship is the fuel for the mission of God. So we come full circle to Eugene and his helpful description of worship as that act of attention to the living and loving God. We're attentive to God. We worship him. We give him our full attention. We know his presence with us, that we might listen to what he's telling us to do in the situations that we find ourselves, that we might participate not on our agenda, but in his mission. Oh, how the world needs to see a people who know what it is to have been broken and healed. We need deeper discipleship. Christophorus quoted 2 Peter 1:4, so let's look at that in its full context. His divine power has given us everything we need for life and godliness. Is that right? Or is he exaggerating? He's given us everything that we need through the knowledge of him who called us by his own glory and goodness. Thus he's given us through these things his precious and very great promise, so that through them you may escape from the corruption that is the world because of lust, and may become partakers of the divine nature. There's that change that we long for, of leaving behind those ungodly ways and living a life of godliness. For this very reason, you must make every effort. It doesn't happen by magic. It happens by us participating in what God wants to do in our lives. It requires effort from us. You must make every effort to support your faith with goodness, and goodness with knowledge, and knowledge with self-control, and self-control with endurance, and endurance with godliness, and godliness with mutual affection. There, we need each other, because you can't be mutually affectionate if you are on your own. With love. Whole life worship doesn't just happen. It requires effort. It includes Sunday worship. Sunday worship is important. Singing songs of praise is key. But our participation in God's mission is not one day versus 6, rather is all 7 together. This is a bit idealistic in one sense. We don't have time this morning to touch on the fact of, do you know what? We live in a broken world. Some of you, when you go to your other 6 days, know that brokenness. That on a Sunday night, you have in the pit of your stomach that low-level anxiety about, I dread going into work tomorrow. I dread seeing that person. That we experience the reality of Genesis 3, that the ground has become cursed and full of toil, where we metaphorically or literally are struggling with thorns and thistles, where to do anything requires great sweat, and where death is part of our present reality as well as life. We hope, or I hope, to touch on that in the podcast. I'm not unaware that that is often our reality. But perhaps as an example to follow, as an inspiration, even in the midst of that, can we be like Brother Lawrence, who persevered, who had that secret conversation with God, to develop that habit, the habit that we practice here in this space in our private times with God, so that Christ may be formed in us, so that as we go into the world, we are aware of his presence and we carry his presence with us and we leak his presence as leaky vessels. That's why we need to regularly be filled up, because we're meant to leak. A secret conversation with visible results, as we allow his Spirit to turn us and change us. That the gifts that he has given us, for not just in here but out there, we grow and develop. That they are shot through with his glory, so that as people encounter you, or see you with your friend in a coffee shop or whatever, go, there's something different about them. They experience, they taste something of God's goodness. They see made visible something of God's love. So let us be whole life worshippers. Let us make every effort to let God transform us, so that we participate in a godly way in this world for the sake of Jesus' mission. Amen.